Welcome to Your Future in Sales and Marketing, a podcast that helps you make great career decisions to get the most out of your career journey. We'll introduce you to the AXR network of established senior leaders and a hand-picked group of future aspiring leaders who have it all in front of them. You'll learn what it's like in the top job and how to get there. Your hosts from AXR's specialist sales and marketing recruitment team will also land bonus episodes for you on how to work with recruiters, write a resume, and smash an interview, as well as our very popular market updates. It's the podcast that has it all. You can't get this career advice anywhere else.
Welcome back to another edition of Your Future in Sales and Marketing. I'm Ben Carnegie, Principal Consultant of Marketing from AXR Recruitment. Today, I'm joined by Serge Costi, General Manager of Marketing from Noumi. You'd probably know one of their famous brands, Milk Lab, which we'll unpack a little bit later into the episode there. But firstly, Serge, thanks for joining me today.
No, thanks, Ben. Great to be here. Long-time listener of the pod, so I was stoked when you invited me on. So thanks, mate.
You're welcome. Great to have you on as well. Just to get things started there, as we like to kick things off, just to get things moving, tell us about your favourite brand. What's that? And you can't use one that you've worked for.
No, totally. Look, I was thinking about this. I chose Google. So I was thinking about what do I use in my everyday life, and that plays a role in my life. And Google was the last one I thought of, and then I realized it actually plays a really big role in my life in terms of, Google Maps gets me from A to B. I used it twice already this morning. Gmail keeps me organized. So it's a brand that is in my life, but at the same time, it doesn't ask for anything in return. It's got my data, but, so does everyone these days. But, in terms of, it doesn't, send me these annoying kind of discount emails. It doesn't, try too hard. It just sits there and plays a, strong sense of utility in my everyday life. And for me, I was like, well, I think we can learn from that. If you've got a brand that, delivers on something that is meaningful in people's lives, that's everything you do after that. It comes from a position of strength, all your advertising and promotions, or everything after that is more effortless. So for me, Google is a good example. Just do something well, play a meaningful role in people's lives, and then go from there.
Excellent. Nice. I don't think we've had anybody talk about Google before. It's good to see some other brands coming up there. But I guess it really is a brand that it's really integrated into all areas of our life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even somewhat unconsciously, to the point where we don't search for things, we Google for things now.
Exactly. I almost said Apple, but Apple asks for a lot in return. They're bloody expensive devices, and
to stand in those queues around the Apple store.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I love the brand, but it was definitely Google for me.
Excellent. So where did it all begin before your life started in marketing? What was it like before that?
Yeah, so look, grew up in southwest Sydney, then inner west Sydney. Parents, my dad immigrated from Cyprus when he was a young kid, and he is a very entrepreneurial mechanic by trade, but owned all different sorts of businesses in the auto industry, petrol stations, workshops, and then later a distributor business, which I grew up, working in and seeing him as a, hardworking, really commercially minded, influence. And then, on the other side, my mum was an educator by trade. So she would teach English second language, TAFE, and help immigrants and refugees learn English when they came to Australia, and then, adjust to Australian lifestyle. So, I think those two influences, had a big impact on me, and they took me and my sister traveling a lot as kids as well. We would go to, places like, Israel, Turkey, Egypt, like really kind of different sorts of places.
Real cultural experiences.
Yeah, exactly. And, seeing the pyramids as a young kid, and then seeing my folks interact with different cultures, day to day, I think had a big influence on me, and eventually what I do, these days with, cultural marketing and international business, it kind of, I think had a role way back when I was growing up. So yeah, that was my early influence. And then, in terms of what I wanted to be, I almost pursued a career in IT. Glad I didn't. But, when I was, finishing school, it was around the .com boom. I was doing pretty well in computer science. I came like fifth in the state and got a scholarship to, UTS to study IT, and, fully paid scholarship and, guaranteed, placement and, entry-level job at a big business. And And then early on in that degree, I had this moment where I was, coding away in one of the classrooms, and then we had a lunch break, and my friends were coding in the lunch break on their hobbies, and I was like, "What the hell are you doing?" And they're like, "No, we're just playing.
This is our fun."
Yeah, exactly. That was their hobby. So I'm like, there's no way I could, in full kind of earnest, pursue a career that I wasn't that passionate about. And I'm competing against people that are really passionate and doing it as a hobby. So that was a real kind of aha moment for me. And I just had to pull the Band-Aid off. I gave up the scholarship and switched to business, which, for me, I made a promise to myself, only pursue things that, you're passionate about and you find rewarding and don't just chase, what you think is the right path.
Indeed. Would have been an interesting conversation with your parents at that point, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Look, what's he doing?
It was, look, it was challenging at first, but I think also, they were always supportive of, me, doing the things that I love. So,
sure.
It was.
I'm sure they look back now and there's no regrets anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. So obviously decided that IT wasn't for you, went down that business path and landed your first role really at George Weston Foods.
Mm-hmm.
Went through a management traineeship there, and so worked your way through sales, finance, operations. How did that shape your approach to marketing in future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a great opportunity to be invited onto that management trainee program. It was a selective process that only took about 5 or 6 per year, but it was a great. I think it was a fantastic experience to be able to sample and experience all functions through a business, particularly at an early stage in your career. It was very rewarding. I remember when I started, I was so itching to get my corporate career underway and my office job, my first ever office job. And then my first position was they put me out in a factory working on the line for 6 months. And I was like, holy crap! It's like, what am I doing out here? I've just finished uni and now I'm sorting out dinner rolls on a bakery line. But that was a great experience because for me, just seeing how important operations is, my task was to really write the instruction manuals on these machinery that were old. They didn't have the standard operating procedures around anymore. So I had to spend my days talking to, line operators, batching, the batching operators and the pack line and all the people working in the factory and just trying to work out how do these machines operate? What do you do here? What happens when you press this button? And just chatting to them and making sense of the whole process. It was great to be able to connect with the various people in the business and not kind of sit away in a silo, but also from a marketing perspective, you kind of realize that marketing in one sense is at the end of that whole process. You need a quality product. You need to be able to ship it to customers, and then they have to be able to have the opportunity to sell it before our consumers even come into the equation. But at the same time, marketing is also at the front of that whole process. You really need to be able to have those insights and guide the business, in terms of what types of products you need to make to appeal to consumers. So, just getting that orientation of where marketing fits in the overall equation, I think is great to see from the lens of working in these other functions, sales, category, finance. And, I don't know of any other programs these days that really put graduates through that kind of experience. So, that was I think a very valuable one.
Absolutely. They didn't try to put you in IT for a little while there?
No.
You made your decision about that one earlier.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, that certainly gave you a great grounding and a really holistic experience as you developed your career over time there. After your time with George Weston Foods, you'd moved across to Diageo, where you spent the next 9 years kicking things off as an ABM, but working your way right up to director with both domestic and international positions. What were some of the key moments or key learnings that you had during that time?
Yeah, I mean, Diageo is a fantastic company and a great experience. I really look back on with a lot of fond memories. At that time, I joined them because, they had a reputation and still do for, doing some of the best, brand building, their attention to, consumer insight and their whole process of marketing fundamentals. and their commercial appetite as well. I think it was just a great business to kind of grow up in. I joined as the assistant brand manager of Bundaberg Rum, which again, a fantastic experience coming into a brand that had so much opportunity and resources, at its disposal. One day shooting ads with the Wallabies and the Bundy Bear, and then the next going to V8 supercars and NRL and music festivals. It was just one of those environments where, everything was big, to have an idea, and it was the common feedback you'd get was, how can you make this idea bigger and bolder and more impactful? And that's such a great environment to kind of, to grow up in. And we had some fantastic kind of, activations. I remember with one activation, we dangled a couch over a stadium with a crane 40 meters up in the air, and just to get the best seats in the house for for
I think I remember that one.
It was a lot of fun. It was one of those things where it's like, have the idea and then work out how the hell you're going to do it, and and all the kind of logistics and all that sort of stuff would come after that. But there was lots of different experiences like that at Diageo, and I got the opportunity to really kind of exercise creativity and really learn the basics there. From Bundy Rum, moved to the whiskey portfolio and gin, just as the gin boom was kicking off in the 2010s, which was a fantastic experience. And then ultimately got promoted to the global headquarters for Smirnoff in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think that's something that those multinational companies can offer that other, smaller companies can't, the ability to move around, and they tend to move their talent around the world. So if, you're looking for that international, experience in the context of going overseas, then, places like Diageo and other companies are great for that. And, they moved us over, me and my family over to New York, and we had a real adventure over there. And I remember first day in the New York office, walking Fifth Avenue, Manhattan, walking into the office thinking, wow, this is big. I was super nervous. And then getting in there and doing the work and realizing that, these same people all around the world to back home, there's just, everyone's trying the best. There's no level that's out of reach to, us here in Australia. And, if you work hard and you do the right things, then, you can make it anywhere. And that gave me a real confidence that, really there's no sales and marketing geniuses out there. There's just people doing their best. And, I think all the work's pretty simple at its core, but it's, getting the basics right, communicating ideas and working hard and putting yourself in the space where the right opportunities come up. So that was a big confidence booster, just moving over there and working with that team. A great experience. Our global team came from all around the world, and it was just such a melting pot of different kind of backgrounds and experiences. And my main remit there was, to grow the Smirnoff brand in emerging markets across, Africa, South America, Asia, and parts of Europe. And, there was a situation for Smirnoff where in mature markets, the brand's well known and kind of experiencing that mainstream squeeze that, everyone talks about, people either trading up or trading down. But in emerging markets, there's something very different going on. You have this emerging middle class that were looking to trade up to brands, to global brands. And there was an opportunity for Smirnoff to really tap into that. But up until that point, hadn't really cracked the formula to be able to reach them, and hadn't adapted itself to be able to localize to, all the different kind of needs of an emerging middle class consumer across these markets. So, one of the things we looked at was really, going deep into cultures and in, looking for what are the culture nuances, across these markets, but then what is consistent at a global level that Smirnoff can deliver on as well. So overall, people are looking for, good times. They want to go out, they want to have fun, but then locally, how they might experience the category and tastes and, shopper occasions and different off-premise and on-premise, nuances. They're the sorts of things that were really important to adapt to, which was, I think, a fascinating experience, just that cultural understanding and going deep into these markets. And it's quite successful. We had, really good launches in Mexico, Brazil, Thailand, South Africa, Nigeria. Nigeria was a really fascinating project because a large population, hundreds of millions of people, more middle class millennials at that time than the entire population of Australia, more millionaires there than there are here. And just this drive and this hunger for quality global brands. But, due to foreign exchange and currency swings and taxes and duties, it was really difficult to reach them from overseas. So we tailored the brand, manufacturing it locally, hitting all the right product features, price point, accessibility, route to market, and really nailed the sweet spot of all those factors. And it quickly became the number one mainstream brand there. It was outpacing all the other global brands, and it was a lot of fun, showing up in Nigeria with the local team there, having a massive party, seeing everyone enjoying this creation that we'd all worked so hard on. Was one of those pinch me moments. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I mean, brilliant to be able to work on such a huge global brand and working in so many different markets concurrently.
Yeah.
And that move that you made to the US, that was, I think, your first director's role. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So nice step up title-wise for you there. But I know you and I have had a bit of a discussion around the nuances between Australian titles and titles in the US there. So a director there.
Yeah, I think it's something, there's a lot of title differences. There's a lot of vice presidents over there. You don't really see that here. You do see more American companies, setting up and recruiting in Australia. So I think director there, probably head of, equivalent to a head of here. And then you got manager here, probably more equivalent to an associate over there. And so there are subtle differences, but also, it's not something to think about or worry about. It's, the main thing to think about is like, what's the remit and what's your responsibility? What can you actually, what can you achieve in that role? No one looks back on their titles and reminisces about a title. It's just, no one does that. It's silly. But you do think about the kind of things you were able to achieve in a role, the relationships you formed, the fun you had along the way. That's the important stuff. And, so I just wouldn't worry about title at all. I think, actually, I remember as assistant brand manager at Diageo, I was so eager to get off that bottom rung in the department, and so obsessed about getting to that brand manager level. But as an ABM, had some great support from my leadership, had some great accountability given to me as well. I remember doing an advertising campaign that won a Cannes Lion. And they flew me to France to go to the awards. They while I was over there, I got to study in a French creativity academy. Stuff that some people don't achieve in a whole career. Yet I was able to do this stuff as an assistant brand manager. That's the stuff you think about. That's the stuff you remember. You don't really think about your title. So I wouldn't worry about it. There's differences. Focus on what's the business like, who are the people you're working with, what can you achieve in your role? And if you set your own standards for the best you can achieve, you can't lose. So that's how I would think about it.
Really driving it home that it's all about the impact that you create.
Absolutely,
rather than the validation you get from the title.
Exactly. I think if you're worried about that or other status markers, then I think you focus on the wrong thing, and it's preventing you from actually thinking about what matters and the creativity you can bring to your role.
You do. And then eventually you must have been a bit homesick. You did come back to Australia, but continued your career in the liquor and alcohol industry and joined Lion. But in this circumstance, you came back in more of a specialised innovation role.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's probably quite a few amazing innovations that you pulled together over the years there. Was there one particular one that stood out for you?
Yeah, I think, coming back to Australia, I was keen to stay in the liquor industry at that time, and I really wanted to work on big beer, and Lion had such a great reputation and it has such a great culture as well. So I was really thrilled to join the team there. Coming back into an innovation role it was something different. I'd always had exposure to innovation through my brand roles, but I think a specialist role like that is quite interesting. You look at big category opportunities, and then how do you, and solving those, and then how do your brands potentially play into that? Whereas sometimes I think when you're looking at innovation from a brand lens, you think how far can you stretch your brand, but brands don't always stretch far enough to where the true category opportunities are. So I think those specialist roles are important, and obviously depending on the size and resources of the company. But for me, it was a great chance to practice some of those and go deeper into some of those skill sets. The couple, looking at the remit there was to look at how to bring drinkers back to beer. There were drinkers walking away from beer, and for a variety of reasons. And the challenge was, how do we grow the category by bringing drinkers back to beer? And there was two spaces that emerged that were kind of nascent at that time, and that was like gluten-free beer, people that couldn't drink beer for obvious reasons. And then
I was very pleased to see that come out.
I
have had my moments. I still don't drink beer now, but it was great to be able to actually have the gluten-free options that you put out there.
Yeah. And so that was very new, and non-alcoholic beer as well, which the category didn't really exist at that time. And the gluten-free one was interesting. I remember we saw the technology out of the headquarters at the Kirin headquarters for a rice beer that hadn't been commercialized anywhere in the world. And it was something really interesting, and it looked like an unlock for that space in the Australian market. And so we went on a really long path with the brewers and the R&D team to kind of get this into a shape that would be palatable to the Australian consumer. So we're talking hundreds of different recipes, a lot of collaboration across ops and across the business. It's a very challenging project, but I think they're the ones that are challenging, that have the potential to grow the category and really kind of shift the business, the ones that are going to be difficult, and they do require a lot of resilience, and they do require a lot of problem solving and a lot of collaboration. And so, I think that was an example where, the business really came together for that. New skill sets, new capabilities in the factory, new CapEx proposals. But, the outcome was new drinkers to the category, which the retailers loved. Another one is alcohol, the zero alcohol launch of Heineken Zero. That was one which I think everyone kind of knows the category now, but at that point it didn't exist. And
it was the first of its kind, really.
Yeah, and all the research was saying, don't do this. People were saying in focus groups, what's the point of beer with no alcohol? I'll just drink something else. So they were saying that, but then when you put the drink in their hands and observed them in these social settings, what they did was something very different. And having that green bottle in the hand and being able to be part of
a bit of a placebo effect. When you're at a barbecue or something, you've still got the beer rather than a glass of cola or something. And being a part of the conversation, that was the main thing, being included in the social settings, which I don't think anyone can really articulate or they don't really think about in research, but how it was showing up was very different. So that was one kind of learning there around. Don't trust research on face value. I think if there's an opportunity, you really kind of got to push and think about it from all different angles. And then that category really took off. I love Heaps Normal. That's my favorite non-alc beer. It's the category's still booming from what I understand. I think I've certainly tried one of those there, and the taste, it's just like a regular beer. You're expected to be too watery, or that there'd be different flavour profiles that are not associated with beer, but they've done it really well.
Yeah, and guys don't want to drink a lemon, lime and bitters or a sugary Coke when everyone
so
else
many
is
of those
drinking
things
beer.
you can have. You don't want that furry tongue.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously, number of really interesting and complex innovations that you had there at Lion, but. Another thing, whilst you were at Lion, you took part in the scholarship program for the Marketing Academy. How did that influence your leadership style and your personal development?
Yeah, so the Marketing Academy it's a selective scholarship. It's a non-for-profit based in Australia, originating from the UK, so based in the UK and also in the US as well. Look, it's a highly selective program. They take 30 people every year from agency and client, from the mid to senior kind of levels of experience. And really at its core, it's a leadership accelerator, and it's a chance to really work on leadership skills and have all the support you need for that year that you're on the program. The other thing is it's once you're in for life. So the alumni is very tight knit. We're a very, very close community and got some great connections and relationships throughout the industry as a result, and still some of my best friends through the program, and we all went through it together. But you look at its core, go through a year of, you get an executive coach, you get mentored by leaders within the industry, so you get to extract all this wisdom from people who have been through it all before. And then you go through a series of leadership programs as well, in looking at soft skills. You're in an environment where you're able to, for many for the first time ever, start to question things like, what are my values and beliefs and behaviors? How are they helping me, and how are they kind of stopping me from being the best kind of...
it drives that self-awareness piece.
Yeah, exactly. And the best version of myself. And if you're the best version of yourself, then you can be a better leader. And I think it's pretty rare to have the time and focus to be able to do that, and also to go through it with 30 other people together. It's quite a raw and transformative experience, if you want it to be. And so for me, I got a lot out of that. I think it helped me in, I guess in practical senses, you go through training on deep listening. You look at these soft skills, such as how giving others a chance to bring their opinions to the table, all sorts of soft skills. And look, I don't actually like the term soft skills, because they're actually really hard.
They're really hard.
They're hard to master. They take a lot of practice, and they're not soft in terms of their outcomes as well. We're talking about things that can help productivity and engagement, and those things have real impacts on business outcomes as well. So, I think that program for me, I think your question was that, as a leader, definitely gave me a greater sense of self-awareness, gave me these skills, these little 1%ers that I can kind of incorporate into my day-to-day, that I think have helped me be, I hope, a better leader, but also I think, certainly definitely better at my job, which has been a big boost for me, I think.
Absolutely. And as you say, continues to grow your network, because you've got that, not only the alumni that you went with here, but you can go to any of the locations around the world that also has the marketing academy, and you've already got a network that will happily welcome you.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's great. I think the friendships that we've formed through that period is again a huge plus for me.
Indeed. So that really brings us up to the present day. Now, I know you've made a comment off air around how you've had quite a linear career, as most people in FMCG. You'd see a very clear path from ABM through to director of time in innovation, and that's now led you to Noumi. Tell us a little bit more about just the size and scope of that role to paint the picture for us.
Yeah, so Noumi, I think Noumi's the best business that you probably never heard of. It's a great company, but not many people know the company. But you'd certainly know our brands and our products. We've got deep roots in dairy and plant-based beverages, consumer nutritional products and nutritional ingredients for the B2B trade. And we're one of the biggest manufacturers of private label milk, dairy and plant-based in the Australian market, and one of the biggest exporters of long life milk to Asia, and also some of the strongest brands as well. You think about Milk Lab as the number one brand in the Australian cafes. We've got Australia's Own and Vital Strength and other brands in our portfolio. So it's an Australian headquartered company, and we've based out at Southwest Sydney, which I think is been a great source of talent in terms of getting diverse talent from Southwest Sydney, and how we've been able to grow from those roots has been really impressive. But my role there is general manager of marketing for the beverages division. I look after the marketing strategy and execution in the Australian market and international markets as well, with a great team, based in Australia, Singapore and China.
Indeed. It was an interesting time when you first joined there, though. The early days, you had to go through a complete rebrand and product rationalisation. Talk us through what that transformation journey looked like. Yeah, so the
Noumi transformation was a very exciting and rewarding experience for me and for everyone in the business that worked through it. In the early days, there was a need to restore the financial stability of the company, and hence the transformation project, which was really driven by the board, the executive, and throughout the whole business. And it was a business-wide collaboration to really get down and improve the financial performance of the business, from operations, sales, marketing, finance, people and culture, across the entire business. Everyone was working hard and really dedicated to turning the business around, and to see that transformation broken down into individual initiatives that everyone had accountability to deliver. Everyone worked hard, and the results really speak for themselves. In 2020, the business posted a negative EBITDA result, and then turned that around and steadily improved year on year. To the year 2025, we reported $57 million EBITDA. And then in 2026 for the half, $33 million in EBITDA at the half. So that financial turnaround was impressive. It was a whole company effort that was so rewarding to work through and collaborate across the business to get it done. We had sales and marketing delivering new products and new channel opportunities really effectively. We had operations really looking at improving the profitability and efficiency of the factory. And all the while, the company was increasing its investment in brands and in people as well. So to be able to do that whilst growing top line and whilst growing the bottom line was a really impressive journey, and something that I definitely am grateful to experience.
Really interesting to go through such a huge transformation and such a successful turnaround there as well. And obviously part of that success was due to the fact that you're now operating in 24 different markets. Certainly not an easy feat, I'm sure, but navigating those cultural nuances and trying to connect common insights across those markets must be pretty challenging. How do you make it work?
Yeah, so Milk Lab operates in 24 markets. It's been a real success story in the Australian market and now also in international markets. The Milk Lab brand is born as a cafe staple in collaboration with the industry. So it was designed to solve a real need in cafes where, when it was created 10 years ago, there was really no range of alternative milks that were able to perform like dairy milk in cafes. When you think about the pressures of the steam wand and the heat and the acidity of espresso based drinks, Milk Lab was really the first to unlock that opportunity for dairy alternatives, and built in collaboration with the industry, in collaboration with baristas and roasters and cafe owners. It created something that was solving a real problem. And its positioning around this performance in coffee gave it a real sense of this real targeted ability to be a challenger within a much broader category. And there were certainly some incumbent brands at the time in alternative milks, but no one was serving that need. And that's a niche that Milk Lab identified and really did better than anyone else. And it was a niche that was an opportunity, but it wasn't a niche in the sense of it was scalable. And if you think about the number of coffee cafes in Australia, there was potential for tens of thousands of customers. And so Milk Lab really kind of servicing this need in the Australian market and having such a clear positioning around coffee would really set the platform to be able to then translate that in overseas markets. And thinking about overseas markets, what's the category? In all these countries we operate in, there's a specialty coffee industry, there's a cafe channel, and Milk Lab has the ability and the positioning to be able to unlock that category opportunity. And within that, Milk Lab really was kind of focused on building that community around baristas, helping them to do their jobs better. And that travels. That travels not just in Australia, but through Asia. Some of our biggest market, talking South Africa, India, the Middle East, Indonesia, Thailand. in each of these markets, there's a lot that's common with the Australian market in terms of people want a good quality coffee. They want a great cafe experience. Baristas want coffee quality and the ability to do their best work. And that's the commonality that Milk Lab can really tap into. So they're the things that you kind of look for and keep consistent at the same time as, the distinct brand assets, our Milk Lab logo, our colours, the bottle icon here, and they're the things that you want to keep consistent and not have to alter by market. But then with all that, you really need to appreciate the cultural nuances. And I think that's the kind of the balancing act and understanding, okay, well, how do people consume the category in those markets? Are they drinking it are there flavors such as pandan and durian are very popular in Singapore and Malaysia, but they're unheard of in India and in South Africa. So at a taste level and in food and beverage, taste can be quite specific. So you have to appreciate how the brand shows up in recipes, on the menu board, in these cafes, all the while not compromising on the things that matter at a global level and the kind of things that I spoke about. The interesting thing also, when you take that approach, you can look at these cultural trends that are specific to a market, and you can also see, well, is there anything that's emerging that's gonna become global? And for us, we saw the matcha trend kind of in Asia before it hit in Australia. And so we were able to look at that, and that was one thing that we thought, well, this is actually going to become quite big globally. And we were able to jump on that quite quickly. And we're the first brand really to kind of give support to cafes around matcha recipes and to use that as a new and emerging trend. So I think that has been, an advantage to having international presence as well. You kind of get to see things first as they come up, but also the potential for the brand when you think about the size and scale of some of these markets as well is a huge opportunity for the business.
Indeed. So you spotted matcha early. I've been reading a little bit recently about camel milk coming into the country there. No aspirations to go into that category?
No, I think we'll let that one let that one slide.
Fair enough. I'm not sure if I'm game enough to go up to a cafe and ask for a camel latte just yet.
No, I wouldn't.
But, I mean, Milk Lab's been a real success story. 10 years ago, it pretty much went from 0 to 145 million, which is seriously impressive. When you look at the key decisions and strategies you put in place, what do you think has helped lead to its success?
Yeah, so I think the first part of that journey was certainly around the decision to focus in around the barista and really cultivate that community, that barista community, and bringing them together, giving them support through training, opportunities to improve through barista battles and barista competitions, and then helping them compete on the global stage. Really creating that authenticity within that community is something that was critical in the early stages of forming the brand. And a lot of that thinking also, myself and other people in the team have come from the alcohol industry, where bartender and cultivating that on-premise credibility is key to growing kind of emerging brands. So a lot of that translated quite effortlessly. But that community aspect was a real critical point for the brand, partnering with cafes and all the work the sales team did to really drive distribution just through quality, consistent product that served a real need for the cafes. It was really the first piece that set the foundations. And then with a strong cafe brand and a strong cafe business, that then created the right and the credibility to be able to extend into other channels. And, the launch into retail, which, really only happened after the first 7 years of the brand. So the brand had already reached 100 million in revenue through the food service industry before it even thought about going into the retail channel. And so by the time we launched in the retail channel, there was already a strong cult following for the brand. There was advocates from the barista community. And then when we launched into retail, we hit the ground running. It was the most successful retail launch within the last 5 years within the barista category. We grew to the number one barista almond milk. Our brand is growing 50% year on year, and we're one of the the fastest growing plant-based milk brands in the category. So that hard work of building that credibility in the home channel of the food service channel, then, allowed us to be able to look at incremental channels, just retail, and then also give us the confidence to take the brand into international markets, where a lot of these markets look at the Australian market as a source of credibility due to our reputation in coffee, and the coffee industry in Australia is well known around the world. To have the number one brand for the Australian cafe channel in Australia translates quite well overseas as well. So I think those early moves around building credibility within community, I think was certainly relevant for Milk Lab, and something to consider for other brands and other categories.
Indeed. Now you've built a pretty solid team around such a rapidly growing brand across multiple markets there. What are some of the key principles that guide your team building and management style?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know about principles. We're a really tight team. We have quite a small team in Australia and Singapore and China, all working on the Milk Lab brand. But we're really well connected, despite how the different geographies we operate in. I think, look, we have a lot of fun. We've got some great diversity in our team, and I think that's one of the advantages of being located in Southwest Sydney. We're able to bring a lot of new and diverse opinions into our team. So we're constantly, ahead of the trends. We're, in an environment where I think everyone's got the ability to bring new ideas to the table, and we're able to act on those quite quickly, being headquartered in Australia and able to move on things quite quickly. So I think that's one advantage that I really appreciate within our team. And then I think also just the fact that we all respect our different backgrounds and different opinions, I think is a huge plus as well.
And when you look at the fact that you've got people located not just in Australia but globally there as well, how do you connect everybody to the business strategy and goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us it's a matter of the company strategy is the company strategy, and that's really clear. But I think a big part of that is also just understanding what are the initiatives that ladder directly up into that company strategy. And I think the whole team plays a very big role in delivering those initiatives. The stuff that you're working on day to day it has a real impact. And it also gives us clarity that, are we working on the right things? Making sure that we're working on the right things that ladder straight back up into that strategy. I think that's something that, everyone's clear on, and everyone has an opportunity to make an impact in that sense as well. So I hope that is something that really connects people to the company strategy. And best part is it's not super complex. It's not complicated stuff. It's got a brand that's really clear sense of who it is, and we've got some channels that we're contesting and doing well in, and there's some activities within each of those channels that we really know what good looks like in that sense. So I think everyone's got a chance to make a meaningful difference in the overall strategy.
Excellent. Yeah, really good to get a bit more a deep dive into Noumi and everything within it there. So before we dip into your advice, anything that you would change in your career looking back?
Oh, look, I've had such a great journey. Like, I've enjoyed my career. Like, I can honestly say there hasn't been a role that I haven't enjoyed, and I think that's been a big driving part of my career, is just to be having the chance to seek out these types of opportunities and make the most of it. So I've really enjoyed my career. Look, I think early on, like I mentioned, my first role at George Weston Foods, being able to experience all sides of the business, I think that's such a rewarding experience. It's a shame that we don't get to do more of that as we progress. So I would love to have spent more time in sales and other areas of the business as well. But I think when your career is going well and opportunities are coming up, it's really hard to kind of sometimes stop and think about that. But I wouldn't change anything. It's been a pretty fun journey.
Excellent. So a little bit more advice for our listeners there. Knowing that Noumi works across such vibrant channel mix, food service, retail and international markets, what advice would you give to marketers seeking a similar breadth in their roles?
I think definitely look at the business you're in and what channels are on offer first and foremost. If you're in a big company that really only operates in the retail channel, then that's going to limit your exposure. But get yourself in the kind of environment where you have access to the channels that you really want to broaden your skill set in. I think in the alcohol industry, there's the on-premise channel, which is a very vibrant channel. In consumer goods, there's the food service channel, again, which is potential for tens of thousands of customers, each with individual needs, each with an individual opportunity to create value for those customers. Then you've got international markets. There's also direct to consumer. There's pharmacy. There's so many different, sales channels. And I think if, you spend your career just operating in one of those, I think you're missing out on a lot of great experiences. So yeah, we are fortunate at Noumi. We get to operate in such a, vibrant breadth of channels. And I think that's something that, is a real advantage for Noumi. And hopefully that others find that appealing.
Now, outside of Noumi, you spend time as an executive coach. What recurring challenges do you hear and what strategies can you offer to our listeners?
Yeah, so I got some formal training in executive coaching, and the reason I was able to receive great coaching myself, so something that I became passionate about, and really I wanted to be better at my job as a leader. I had no real formal training in coaching, so I was able to, to get trained and with the intent to be better at my job. And I'm trying. I obviously don't always get it right. It's hard, but that's the sort of training for me that I was thinking, can last a lifetime. And, there's so much training these days with digital and AI, which is great. It's great to remain current, but that type of training is, going to be superseded within 5 years with whatever's, next in that space. So, I think it's also important to look at what skills can you build on that are going to last a lifetime. So coaching was one thing for me that I thought would help me be better at my job, but also me, practice and be better over time as well. So that's what kind of drew me to that space. And then, outside of Noumi, I've been able to pick up some clients, and then through that, it's been actually really interesting and really insightful as to what's going on in other sectors as well. And the thing I've really noticed is that everyone's going through the same stuff. Everyone's having the same sort of the challenges, whether you're in telcos or tech or, government or whatever, it's or consumer goods like ourselves. So, and you don't have to suffer through that either. People, there's solutions to all of these things. And that's what, I love about coaching as well. You really get the chance to help people solve these problems and solve them themselves as well. That's the fun foundational idea of coaching. So it's something I like. It's something I find really rewarding. But yeah, look, the most common things I've noticed that people kind of get stressed about, I'm feeling overwhelmed and I don't know how to prioritize, got difficult performance conversations to have with my team, feel like my career's stalled or I'm not growing, it's a really common one. Or what else is there? I'm having, difficulty with coworkers or my boss or these sorts of things. So this is really common that everyone's going through. And, the great thing is that all of it's really solvable. And, we could probably go into those, but there's probably an hour on each one of those. So we probably don't have time to go through it.
We might have to do a series for this one.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, I think the thing to remember is that most of these problems are solved through just having the right conversations, either with your peers or your leader. All of these problems that you've got the skills already and the knowledge to solve them. And I think the great thing about coaching is it just helps people see that and helps them find that clarity, which is something that, I love about it.
Excellent. And that almost brings us to a close. Any last pieces of advice for our listeners at all?
No, I think just enjoy what you're doing. I think have fun along the way. I think your development is your responsibility, I think, and it's up to you to kind of set your own bar around what you can achieve and what you want to get out of your career. So that's all on you. Have a good time doing it.
Absolutely. It's been great having you on the show today. Thanks very much for joining me there, Serge.
Thanks, Ben. It's been a pleasure.
Not a problem. And look, it's been a really insightful episode. There's certainly some great moments of wisdom in there, particularly around no matter where you are in your career, the impact that you can create rather than worrying about what people call you to your face and behind your back, hopefully not. Then from here, We've got a huge number of future episodes that will be coming out very shortly there. I won't give you any spoilers today, but I'm sure there'll be some interesting tidbits that will come up in future episodes there as well. Don't forget to sign up to our mailing list so that you're regularly getting information like our annual salary guide, which is certainly highly relevant still for 2026, as well as information like the Sales and Marketing Collective so that you can see where all of your friends and colleagues are moving throughout their careers there as well.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast from AXR Recruitment and Search. We're passionate about helping you get the most out of your sales and marketing career. Keep listening as we bring you more career insights and advice from Australia's inspiring sales and marketing leaders. See you next time on Your Future in Sales and Marketing.